Joe Lacitch spent over 20 years in the U.S. Army, retiring with the rank of Major. People who knew Joe told me that he loved the military and would have spent his entire career in the Army. But his wife hated the military life, so to keep peace in the family, he retired after 20 years. Other people who didn't know Joe until after his retirement from the Army stated that you could tell Joe was ex-military. So let's examine Joe's military experience. Joe was born and raised in Chicago. His parents had immigrated to the United States around 1918 and were of Croatian descent. His father was born in Italy and his mother was born in Czechoslovakia. Joe's father was a steel worker. His father had served in the Croatian Navy. Joe was born on September 30th, 1921, and was the eldest of 8 children. As a teenager, Joe attended Tilden Technical High School, an all-boys school for students who excelled in technology. Not far from Joe's house was the Serbian Orthodox Church, which Joe attended. Joe's brother told me that at 18 years of age, Joe spoke fluent Serbian as well as English. The church elders wanted Joe to join the clergy, but Joe decided to pursue a different career. In May of 1939, Joe joined the Illinois National Guard. He did odd jobs to make money. However, in March of 1941, 9 months prior to Pearl Harbor, Joe's unit is called up for active duty. He was assigned to the 131st Infantry, Company A. Here is Joe's enlistment record from 1941. An interesting tidbit for which I have been unable to find supporting information is that Joe gave his civilian occupation as an actor. The Order of the Battle by Shelby Stanton states that the 131st Infantry went to Camp Forest in Tennessee. Here is a picture of Joe from his time with the 131st Infantry. But as this article states, Joe was with the 7th Infantry Division. It appears that some units of the 7th Infantry Division went to Longview, Washington in 1941 for tactical maneuvers. By late 1942, Joe was assigned to the 159th Infantry in California. It appears that this unit did a great deal of amphibious assault training before being transferred to the island of Attu near the end of the chain of Aleutian Islands in Alaska. This was in June of 1943. Here is a picture of Attu. This island had been captured by the Japanese in 1942. In May of 1943, the Japanese were driven from the island. The 159th was part of an occupying force on Attu for the next year. In August of 1944, the 159th returned to Seattle. However, about this time, Joe was assigned to the 204th Infantry. It is not known where he may have served with this unit, Alaska or Seattle. Ultimately, Joe will be stationed at several places during his last year, including Camp Swift in Texas, Camp Shelby in Mississippi, and Camp Campbell in Kentucky. He is discharged from the Army on December 26, 1945. Note that his daughter Susan was born on November 6, 1945. However, in March of 1946, Joe re-enlisted with the Army for service in Alaska. For whatever reason, his service for the next 5 years is not revealed in his military record. I inquired with the National Personnel Records Center and noted this mission, but all I got was a rather stern reply stating, "This is all you're going to get." So I was able to find some information for Joe during this time period. His son confirmed that Joe was stationed in Italy at some point in this 5-year period, and he learned to speak Italian while there. But why all this secrecy about his military service over this 5-year period? During my research, I talked with a man who, after World War II, attended the Army School of Language, where he learned to speak Serbian. He would later be stationed in Europe, where he would monitor radio communications emanating from behind the Iron Curtain. Could this secrecy in Joe's military record have something to do with the fact that he spoke fluent Serbian? Perhaps he was being airdropped behind the Iron Curtain to take part in clandestine missions. Unfortunately, I don't have access to Joe's real duties while in Italy, but it does make me wonder. Also during this mysterious 5-year time period, starting in early 1950, Joe was an instructor of military science and tactics at Gettysburg College in their ROTC program. Note from the Gettysburg College Alumni Bulletin, at least the basics of skydiving were taught in the ROTC program. But someone must have thought that Joe was officer material, as after Gettysburg College, in November of 1951, Joe goes to Officers Candidate School at Fort Benning in Georgia. He graduates in April of 1952. From Officers Candidate School until his retirement, Joe's primary duties are those of an S4. After Officers Candidate School, Joe spends about 15 months in Indiantown Gap Military Reservation in Pennsylvania. This was a training facility for men who had served in the Korean conflict. For about 16 months, Joe serves in Korea. After returning from Korea, Joe is headquartered at Fort Riley in Kansas. However, during this 2.5-year assignment in Kansas, Joe is temporarily assigned to Camp McCoy in western Wisconsin for about 7 months in 1955 and 4 months in 1956. By July of 1957, Joe is en route to Nuremberg, Germany for a 3-year assignment. He will leave Germany in August of 1960. Joe will spend his remaining year in the Army at Fort Campbell in Kentucky. He officially retires from the Army on May 31st, 1961. In the 1960s, Joe works for International Electronics Incorporated, or IEI. They had developed technology to manufacture small electronic devices called electrolytic capacitors. These small components are used in many electronic devices, such as the transistor radio seen in this article. By the early 1970s, Joe was working for Nashville Electronics as a production supervisor. But on October 4th, 1971, tragedy strikes. Joe's daughter Susan is murdered by her estranged husband George Giff in a hijacking that was bungled by the FBI. This tragedy is known as the 5/8 November incident. Joe will leave his job at Nashville Electronics. Everyone has told me that Joe was emotionally devastated over Susan's death. One woman stated that at Susan's funeral, he looked white as a ghost. Since she was orphaned by this murder-suicide, the daughter of Susan and George Giff is adopted by Joe and his wife Jerry. My understanding is that life with the Lakich family after this tragedy was not good. Joe's wife Jerry adored George Giff and had encouraged Susan to marry him, but ultimately George murdered Susan. Apparently Jerry felt a great deal of guilt over this and was said to have gone off the deep end. So as we know, Joe had a grudge to settle. See my YouTube video, D.B. Cooper, The Grudge, to understand more about how abusive the FBI was in the aftermath of this tragedy. So Joe was a decorated veteran with over 20 years of service to our country. He was proud to be a military man.